watching the whole debate.
Hey, good morning. Today is Thursday, October 8th, 2020. We are here for a work session. As always, we'll start with the pledge. Jody, can you please take the lead?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jody. Okay, moving on to the first discussion item. The first item up for discussion is the parking district, matters surrounding bonding for resurfacing and repairs, and that's with Hubbard and Dillingham. So, did you want to start first, Tim, and then?
Yeah, I'll open it up. Is Marty on?
Okay, so we're gonna have Marty, and he'll have to identify himself.
Yeah.
Maybe, he doesn't know his, oh,
Thank you. Were these made available on the website, Joe?
The front sheet was.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
they
have
gave
it
us
already.
more, yeah.
Yeah, it's just the front sheet.
they have a packet.
Spreadsheet, actually.
Oh,
Right.
All right, so we'll make,
I do.
yeah.
thank you.
Marty, are you with us?
He looks muted.
He's muted. You see the little mic, Tim, on the left?
From this angle, I can barely see the
Yeah,
screen.
there's a little red mic. Yeah, now he is.
There he
is.
goes.
Great. Can you hear us, Marty?
Marty, you with us? I can hear you. Okay.
Great.
All right, what we did is, I'm the liaison to the parking district, and we've been meeting once a month for quite some time, and trying to come up with ideas to make repairs downtown in the parking district to various locations. The big one we've been trying to do is the First Street parking lot, and we were able to garner up some funds from the county, but those funds have just not come, and it's been a couple of years now. We're still waiting for them, but in the meantime, to redo the First Street parking lot, we're gonna gain approximately 57 parking spaces. By removing the islands and rearranging the way it is. Marty Sinlewski drew up a plan, and it gave us much more parking that's there now. So in an effort to try to get this done in our talks at the parking district meetings, we asked Drew Dillingham, the town's engineer, to come in and present us with all the work that needs to be done and prioritize it. And Drew gave us a list of the work that needs to be done with the cost, and it's approximately $821,000 worth of work to do the entire parking district, to fix all the repairs that need to be made, and do a lot of repaving and make some changes that need to be made. That's a large number, but I think in a nutshell, what Marty's gonna talk to us about is possibly having the parking district, and keep in mind, this is a special district. This isn't the taxpayers from the town of Riverhead on your regular tax bill. This is just for members in the parking district, which generally is just businesses in the downtown area that pay the special tax. The possibility of bonding out the $800,000 over a 10-year period, have all the work done at one time. The engineer, Drew Dillingham, suggested it's probably a 20-year lifetime of the work that would be done, and the annual budget is approximately $120,000 for the parking district. So with roughly an $800,000 bond over 10 years would be approximately $100,000 a year for 10 years to pay that bond off at current rates. So the thought is, if the annual budget is $120,000, that we have the 100, we could pay off the bond, have all the work done, and then it would just be incidentals over the years to come to maintain. But there are other costs involved. I mean, there's electricity for the street lights, and Mr. Rothar should have some figures for us on that. But at this point in time, I'm gonna turn it over to Marty Sinlewski, the head of the parking district. Marty?
Okay,
Hi,
Marty.
everybody, I hope if I lose you, I'll try to get back as soon as I can.
Are you
Um,
driving?
Basically,
Don't
as
say yes.
Councilman Hubbard, it's,
Yeah, you're freezing up. You're probably in a bad area. Cause that happens to me a lot.
Especially when you're in Zoom, when you go from one cell tower.
2020, with ultimately 125,000 of the annual tax revenue is used for improvements and repairs in the parking district. So, every year we've been doing it somewhat, you know, it's been piecemeal. We're doing repairs, we're doing partial repaving, we're doing pothole repairs. So the money isn't being spent effectively. What we'd rather do, instead of, you know, doing it piecemeal, is get the bonding and then literally go through and be able to completely renovate and do all of, some of them include taking the base out, putting in all new base. At least all of them would be milled and repaired and resurfaced, wall restriped, so it would be a real improvement to the district. And, based on that, with the 100.
Yeah, it's really bad reception, Marty. We can't hear you, but I think we have the idea, right?
Now, we would utilize 100 of it
You can't be on Zoom and driving.
debt service, and that would still allow us $25,000 annual.
Marty, you wanna try stopping your video?
Items that
Well,
came.
Chip, you can do it, right? Chip can do it from his end.
Okay, okay.
Cause that may help with, otherwise we're losing you, you're breaking up and in and out.
So that's what we're looking to do, and we just note that the First Street parking lot would probably be helpful.
All we get is
Still
that's what we're looking to do.
Find out what's going out.
All right, so, yep, that's what you guys said. We got the idea.
Hold off.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah,
You
this
guys-
was, Marty, one thing I didn't mention is that he polled the, members of the parking district, and it was
Oh, yeah, no, thank
unanimously
you.
all favored doing this.
Okay, so, Bill, can you get us a, Excel sheet of the recurring bills that the parking district pays on an annual basis and what that equates to? Because the 125,000 has been spent every year. I don't think there's anything in fund balance in the parking district, is there?
Yes, there's money in fund balance. The last couple of years, they haven't been spending the improvement line. So in the parking district, we actually bring in 180,000 in taxes, but there are other expenses. What Marty is talking about is the improvement line for
Okay.
things like paving and potholes and things like that. And I know they did some work maybe 3 or 4 years ago, but haven't done anything significant then, so the money has been going into fund balance. At one point, we didn't have a big fund balance, but because the last 3 years, there hasn't been a whole lot of work done, there's a balance in there. The balance at the end of 19 is $146,000.
Okay, so
Okay.
the recurring charges are covered in the difference between the 125 and the 180?
Yes, and those are things like electricity, insurance, and debt, okay? So those numbers we have to take out before we give the improvement line whatever is left over. We increase their taxes by the 2% tax cap, and then we leave the money in improvements for whatever else that they don't need to spend in other lines. So in 2021, they have $120,000 in the improvement line, okay? 2020, they have, I'm not sure how much is left. They have 94,000 budgeted. As of August, they only spent 14, at the end of August, they only spent $1,400.
What did they
Okay.
spend that money on? I'm just curious what that improvement line.
So that improvement line is really for everything. I guess what happens is Drew will tell them the critical things that have to be done, like potholes that could be dangerous or create even a larger expense at some point down the road. And then once those are done, there's things like striping and stuff like that that get done with that money. Of which, are, like as I said, there hasn't been a whole lot done lately, in particular this year, obviously because we've been closed down for a good portion of it. So whatever's not spent in 2020 will roll forward and increase that $146,000 worth of fund balance, okay? As far as the debt, to take that $821,000 and bond it over 10 years, each project has something called a probable period of usefulness, okay, PPU, and you can't borrow more than that. But if you go to Wall Street, they don't want you to even borrow that much. It's almost akin to you buying a car for 10 years and taking a 10-year note out on it, where you really know the last 5 years you're gonna have other expenses. So we typically, at the town, will do a 10-year bond for a 20-year project. We had something similar with the dock that we did. We did it in half the time, so then when you have improvements to it, you have the money to do the improvements because you're not cumbered with the debt for longer than, half of the term of the, and the probable period of usefulness really means is when that asset is really dead, so to speak. So you still put improvements into it to keep it running for a while. So a 10-year note would be $105,000. So that would leave us $15,000 to do normal recurring things, whether it's striping or if there's potholes because of a bad winter, to patch all of that stuff in whatever other spots they have. I don't know how exclusive or inclusive all of these repairs are and what little spots still need some work or attention. I think this takes care of most of the big problems that are down there in the parking district.
And I have a question, concerning highway. Are they in any way connected with the paving, so?
Not to the parking district, no.
Yeah, just totally separate?
These are on the properties in
Oh.
the backyard, in the back parking lot or the side parking lots. That's the responsibility of the taxpayers in order to keep parking there. So the district has the responsibility to keep those parking lots in good repair.
But we pay the same rate for the asphalt and for everything as the highway superintendent does with the annual construction contract.
Correct.
That's correct.
And how do we gain those 50-some-odd spaces? How does that happen?
By reconfiguring that First Street parking lot, because the way it was done with the islands, with the concrete curbing and trees, majority of that's gonna be removed, and it's gonna be more of a, straight up and down parking scheme, as opposed to having all these different turns and cuts, and, it's still going to flow fine, but it will gain us, about 57 spaces, I believe.
Yeah. So it's
mean,
gonna
I'm
be a
a
flat
I'm
lot?
a little
Yes.
disappointed we're
A
taking
flat
out
lot,
trees
as
there.
Correct.
opposed to any
Oh.
architectural and environmental?
Yeah. Yeah, I was
Oh,
just, it's disappointing that we're taking trees out in the back, because at some point I think we'll be wishing we could add trees. Just one question, I'm assuming the work is limited just to the actual parking lots, not the bordering sidewalks or anything like that?
That's a true question.
It's the entire parking lot. Basically from the sidewalk in,
Does it include the sidewalk?
it includes the sidewalk. If it's inside the parking lot and it's town property,
Right.
right, not on the street.
They can't hear you.
That's
Go
included in
through,
these
they
costs?
can't hear. Well, just because, and I'm sure this is not included, but we had all those problems with the sidewalk right in front of the Preston House in that area.
That's on the street.
Right.
Yeah, that would not be included in all.
I didn't think so, but I was hoping.
Highway maintains those sidewalks.
Right, aren't those sidewalks, our sidewalks state-owned, not
Yes,
town-owned?
yes, but Highway has pretty much always done the work on them, with the exception of, I think, when the state got work down there, they had a job down there, they did a lot of the sidewalks coming up to,
4 years ago.
right. But Highway will maintain them, like if there's cracks or upheavals from tree roots, generally, they're the ones that maintain that.
And I think you're probably aware of the area I'm talking about.
Yes. Yeah. Highway is in the process of actually, coming up very shortly, gonna redo the apron going into the parking lot alongside Magano's, funeral parlor, because that's been in bad shape. And part of the work that Drew put in here is work that has to be done in that parking lot itself, if you ever drive in it, there's a slope that comes down to the drain. It's, I guess, deteriorated and kind of collapsed in, so there's this huge dip, and that's part of, I think,
The
the,
tunnels?
yes,
Yeah, there's a bunch of them.
yeah.
Yeah, that whole area is bad.
So that would all be
Yeah.
repaired under this.
I support this.
I just have one more question. What is the, end date of completion possibly? I believe Marty mentioned that you wanted to start this all at one time.
Right, if we, our plan is, well, one question that I had was, what happens if we complete the work?
They can't hear you.
You need to come to the mic.
Videographer stating, you wanna come up to the mic? Great.
How's that?
Much better.
He gave you the heads up.
Are you gonna sing to us?
One thing that one question that I had was, if we complete the work before we receive the grant and then receive the grant, do we still receive the money from the county?
It was my understanding, I think, from Dawn that we do. Marty, do you recollect?
Uh-oh. Still frozen.
Marty's in a trance.
Yeah, I think he's also on mute. Okay.
We can get
Um,
the answer to that question.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, I got it.
Okay.
Devin, could you see if Dawn could just step in for a second? Please.
We have to check with Dan, and we compliment. So, I think we do need that money in order to do that location. Okay, do I have you back now?
Yes.
But we only get
Somewhat.
the ending piece.
Yeah, we had no idea what you said.
Have no idea what you said prior to
We only
this,
get the
so.
ending piece, like, and that's all the work.
Yeah, I believe we do have to wait for that money from the county before we can do the First Street parking lot. I believe the funds have to be available for us to apply them to that. However, you know, we could do the work right now with the 800 would be close, but we certainly prefer to count funds.
Dawn, the question is, with the parking district and that money from the county to do the First Street parking lot, if we went ahead and bonded to do the entire job, would we be reimbursed from the county for that money that was allocated for that parking lot?
As long as it's done after the contract is signed. So, we,
You need to go up to the mic so people can hear you. Please.
we are working with the county to get that contract finalized, and once that contract is finalized, any work you do is reimbursable.
And how much money are we talking about?
That grant is 75,000, but the total project cost, and I didn't look at it before I came in, is around 100 and, Marty might even remember better than me, around 100 and,
It's up to 174 now to do the project, but you had
Yeah.
75 from the grant. I believe we had 15,000 from Riverview Lofts.
yes, and then we have some money from, 30,000, I think, from CDBG.
Yes.
And so, you know, those funds put together will cover, you know, a large share of that cost. But since it's been a couple of years since we got the grant and priced the job, you know, the cost has gone up, so.
When do you
Understood.
expect to sign the contract?
Well, we had signed the contract and sent it to the county, we sent it to the county in February 25th, actually, and then I called them as we discussed at the parking district, and I had been kind of following up. They had some changes in staffing there. And they, did not have our copy, which I had in my folder with proof of overnight mailing. And so, I just submitted to Yvette's office another copy to sign, and since we are re-signing it, and it's been so long since they, you know, since the project was approved by the county, we extended the dates of the contract too. So while we were at it, we figured let's just do that, and that was the county's idea. So it's ready to go back to them. They have to then sign it. So that's what's been, there's been a lot of, you know, delay in that process due to COVID, so.
So no, we can't start the project until the contract is signed.
That is normally how it works with this grant funding. The COVID CARES Act stuff, we can reimburse for prior expenditures before contract, so, as long as they qualify. So, you know, it's possible we could talk to them about that. We'll see. I can follow up with them if that's what we need to do.
Well, we could always schedule First Street as being the last part of the project to be completed, so this way we wouldn't have started it before we
Yeah,
get the final copy
I don't
signed.
expect it to be long, you know, but once everybody went down for all those months and had to come back up to speed, it's, you know, that they're doing backlog and now moving forward, so that's been the issue, but I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be within the next month or two.
So the asphalt plants usually close towards the end of November, so we need to get the contract signed as soon as possible so that the work can be done. Otherwise, it's gonna have to be held off until the spring.
Well, it will be held off till the spring, but the thing is, even timing now, according to Drew, is tough to get it done, to get in line, to get
Right.
it done in spring, because these
So-
asphalt companies take other bids and go and, you know.
Yeah.
I think we can, maybe if we can bid that piece a little separately, possibly?
Yeah.
And then just break that out in case we don't get a contract for some reason. I don't see why we wouldn't, but, you know, if it's gonna be spring, I think if we do it that way, then we'll be sure that we're, you know, we know what the price is for each piece, and if we can't do it for whatever reason. But if we get to that point, I know we can call them and work it out, I think.
Yeah, well, if we do it off the annual construction contract, we don't have to bid it, so they don't have to give us estimates, because we know what they're charging us.
Okay,
Right.
so then, you know, it should be easy to resolve. You know,
Now, just a quick question, if we go ahead and we get it signed and we do it, and we've already bonded out for this, would that money, when it comes in, then be put back into the parking district?
that's a Bill question.
Yeah.
I'll swap.
So actually, that brings up a couple of other questions that I wanted to mention. So the fund balance that we are would project to have at the end of this year would be close to 100% of the district's revenue for the year.
Right.
Which means we would have the other, let's say, 80% to help fund any one of these projects if we needed to do it before the bonding. So what we have to do now, assuming we have, you know, three board members that want to go forward with this, I will start the process to do a bond authorization. And as we've done before, it's a 30-day and a 20-day permissive referendum periods and estoppel period. So we're going to be 60 to 90 days out before we can actually spend this money. What we can do is, at that point, I would bond for the total cost of the project, and if we get any other revenues, we don't have to borrow the whole $800,000. We can't do any work that we're paying for with the bond money until that 60 to 90 days passes. But we could use some fund balance to do that. Notwithstanding, we have to wait for a contract for the grant part of it. Anything that's not going to be eligible, maybe one of the other projects that's not going to be eligible for the grant, or the piece of the grant that we have to contribute to, and I think that's more in the contract to the grant, we can use some of the fund balance to start those projects. I know that how much of this we want to get done before the winter or wait till after the winter's over. I'm going to say a large part of this will have to be done in the spring, because that's when we'll have the funding for it.
Well, it makes sense too, because I think Drew will agree that after winter, we'll probably have more potholes and such, so, you know, by the time the ball actually gets rolling on this, we know it's probably not gonna be till spring, so it would give us a chance to make repairs of something that may come up this winter also.
So I'll do a bond authorization for the next meeting, at least get it rolling. We'll have that sitting on the side, knowing that we can use that money in 60 to 90 days, and even if we don't start it until spring. I mean,
Well,
we may have engineering costs before then, which we can use from the fund balance, and then the actual construction costs we can use from the debt and even the grants itself.
I'm assuming the bond rates are still pretty low, just like
Yeah.
mortgages and such.
They are, and I'm estimating 4%. Usually I estimate 5%, but they're so low, I'm estimating 4%. I can't imagine between now and next year they'd go up higher than that. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but
Right.
I think I'm pretty conservative in assuming 4% at this point. We haven't bonded for 4% in the last 10 years. So.
I have a question, so, for Dawn, we're getting $174,000 in grants. 175, correct?
75.
Well, the total.
75, 15,
I
and
think the
30.
grant from Suffolk County is 74,925 or something like that. I just looked at it literally yesterday. We also you know, CDBG is grant funding also, so that's 30,000. And then, Dave Gallo from Riverhead Lofts, kindly pledged 15,000 to the project. So I have to look, there may be one other source of funding, but,
Right.
it's a good amount.
So we're saying an estimate of 174,000, how does that play into the 821,000? Is that,
That's the
document?
parking district's overall plan?
Yeah, it's in
It's
part
just
of
one
the
piece of
821, the
It is
174 is
Yes.
incorporated into
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, so we might need more money.
So the number I need to do a bond authorization for is the 175
Come on.
plus
Yeah.
the 800?
No,
Yeah.
no,
We
it's in
have
it.
to see-
821 is the total with
Yeah.
the 174.
well, that's
Okay,
what,
then we don't have to bond for.
that's
Right.
what Bill said. Bill said we may bond for less. So the bond anticipation resolution is for the full amount, but if we get that grant funding, then we won't have to borrow the
Right,
full
exactly.
800.
Right, we don't have to
and-
use all of it.
Yep. And some of it, you know, some of the total project cost for First Street, we already have that CDBG money, so that's, and we can ask Dave Gallo, so some of, right off the top, those two numbers would not be bonded money.
Okay.
Good.
It's actually less
Hmm?
for us, good. Thank you. Anyone
Thank you,
else?
Dawn.
Anyone
Thank you.
follow up? Everyone's good? Okay. Moving forward, next item, matters surrounding mobile.
Thank you, Marty.
Thank you, Marty. Be safe.
Thank you.
Looks like he's in the jungle on the side of the car.
Yeah, so,
Hope he didn't drive off the road when he was home.
say, just got park bench from Memorial instead of saying MMA away, because it's kind of a surprise. It's supposed to be anyway.
Oh,
Oh,
okay,
okay.
cool.
All right, moving forward, the discussion concerns the Memorial Park bench, and that will be, Jody Gabriel.
Yeah, so an organization that works very closely with the town has requested that we put a bench out front. And they have purchased a memorial plaque for the bench and would like to put it on the sidewalk leading up to town hall, parallel to where the other bench is. When you walk out of town hall, the bench is there. If you walk to the left, it would be then on the right-hand side in the mulched area between the trees. So it needs a concrete pad and the bench. We have the bench, we have the plaque. And I just am requesting permission from the board to put another memorial bench out there.
And the bench will look like the other one.
Yep.
I'm fine with it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Especially when a lot of
Appreciate
people are outside more often, right?
Yeah,
That's a good
yeah.
idea.
People have a place to sit.
Yes.
When
And
they
it used to
wait
be
to
when
come
we didn't
into
have
town hall.
service, we could conduct our business out there on the.
Well, the
way.
first bench is used all the time when you get poor Wi-Fi service or poor
Yeah,
phone
that's what I was
service in
saying.
here. You go out and sit on the bench and make your
Right.
calls.
So,
But it's gotten better.
very good,
Our
thank you.
Wi-Fi's gotten better.
I have no problem moving that forward, and everyone agree?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, okay. In just a moment, you will hear from Barry Long. Chip, can you bring Barry Long from the waiting room onto the platform? Mr. Long will present a summary draft of the pattern book to the town board today. It will be available on the town's website tomorrow. The primary goal of the pattern book is to help drive development and commerce by providing guidance on the future of downtown Riverhead Business District as we steadily continue to improve our downtown area. We have a long way to go in this effort. This is the beginning. We need to have a public hearing for its adoption and eventually incorporate its recommendation into the master plan, which is currently in progress. And before Mr. Long speaks, does anyone want to make? Catherine Kent has been instrumental in working with the Business Advisory Group, and I'm sure you have a point to make, Catherine.
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm very pleased with this whole project. It's been really great working with Barry and his team. I'm very proud, I've actually been working on this for a couple of years, with the Downtown Committee and the Planning Department. And I'm very proud of the work that's been done here. What I'm most pleased about is the transparency, throughout the whole process and the inclusion. We worked very hard to include all the stakeholders, the community, anyone who serves on a board or, is part of the decision-making in the town had an opportunity to weigh in. Our forum drew over 100 people. The first survey where I believe there were around 1,200 responses. And the pattern book, the result of the pattern book is really community-driven. And I believe that UDA, Urban Design Associates, did a good job of taking in all of the different points of view and finding a point that we could all work with. So without further ado, I will turn over to Barry Long.
Good morning.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Supervisor and council members. As Catherine said, I'm going to be giving you a brief update on the downtown pattern book today. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah, just gonna see
Good,
maybe the
okay.
lights a little lower.
Fantastic. Well, we want to thank
Tim, did you want to come up?
the town board,
I've seen this already.
stakeholders, and residents for all their input. This has been,
Jody. There's Jody.
as Councilmember Kent said, a community-driven process. And 40% of the pattern book, as you know, if you've looked at it, and I'm sure you have, documents that input, the input we received in the forums. And that input really provides the foundation for the entire report. So again, 40% of the pattern book is the input. And we really did rely on that. I think sometimes it's better to be lucky than smart. We were very fortunate that we did this, got this started pre-COVID because we were able to do in-person meetings. But online has also worked very well for reaching out to your community. There have been a number of overarching themes. I think the biggest theme that I'd just like to highlight again is the citizens would like to see the town do a better job of leveraging your number one strength, which is identified as the Peconic River. And that's in terms of making physical and visual connections and more riverfront park space. But broadening the range of housing opportunities was another theme, regulating architectural style, creating a town square, and addressing concerns about perception of safety, vacancies, convenient parking. Interesting, that was another agenda item today. And the new large buildings. So we don't have time in a very short executive summary presentation to go through all the community input again, but it's all in there for prosperity. And we want to acknowledge that there's broad consensus on the vast majority of issues. And I would say, in excess of 90%. However, we want to acknowledge that there are some sticky points. Obviously, building heights, which is one of the things that drove the idea of a pattern book in the first place, architectural style. These are things where I think there's been a great dialogue. Not everyone is exactly on the same page, so our approach has been to strike a balance, always to look to strike a balance when there is a variety of opinions. And you'll see in a couple places in the pattern book where we have done that. So as you're familiar with by now, the pattern book is broken into an introduction and then 3 main sections and an appendices. Interestingly enough, not all pattern books have this, but there are policy recommendations in the first section because we got so much feedback on that from the residents and the stakeholders and council. It's actually, in the town board, it's reflected in policy recommendations. So those are recommendations. We also have guidelines for the public areas. Why are they guidelines and not mandated? Well, these are things that the town owns, and we really don't need to mandate what you do. You mandate what you do. But there are guidelines for things like pedestrian-friendly streets, pedestrian-friendly passages, things relating to public safety, parks and open space, and so on. And then the third section is objective design standards for the private development. So this is the public realm, and this is policy, but that third section is on the private development side. And the idea here in setting objective standards is to try to make it more black and white so that it's predictable for developers or building owners who want to do something with their property or just renovate their building as to what the guidelines are, so they're not operating in a vacuum. And then in the appendices, there's a glossary of terms and an extensive documentation of the community engagement process. And again, that's really the driving force behind the pattern book. It's the community, it's not our firm. So just to highlight a few policy recommendations for you, to give you and anyone who's viewing this working session a flavor. One would be on Peconic River flooding. And really, we would applaud the board for reaching out and working with proactively the Army Corps on this issue. And this has happened in the time of COVID. It's important. And we support that and we reinforce that here. We document what the potential effects of sea level rise may be or would be on the downtown study area. And we also just suggest that the town in your planning for new buildings be conservative in your assumptions about sea level rise, in that we're finding in many jurisdictions already the estimates are accelerating or they may go higher. So as has been done with the newer buildings that have been built, being a little more conservative than just following the absolute minimum standards is a good idea. The proposed mix of uses has been fascinating, especially in the time of COVID. But kind of the bottom line here is in the recommendation that it be a unique, predictable, positive experiences. That's what folks want to have downtown. And you already have this in your distinctive mix of cultural uses and civic amenities with small-scale food and beverage, especially local food and beverage. And that really remains the answer for the long term, we believe, for Riverhead. With so much now available at home, and that's really been accelerated over the past 6 months, experiences remain the way to draw folks out of their homes and to places like downtown. It needs to be experiential. It's not a place where you just drive and go in and go out and go home. It has to provide a unique experience, and in the detail here and what we recommend you continue to enforce that. Cultural destinations are especially important in the downtown because they become the unique attractions. And I'd also go on to say, and we talk about this, special events are critically important, but it's bigger than this. So buildings create what we would call the stage set for life. And a lot of the pattern book in this process is focused on what does the building fabric look like. But happenings and events and programming and your restaurants and shops and the things that fill the storefront, that's the activity of life. And without it, you just have a ghost town. And that's the most important thing. And I think we forget that sometimes. We get so focused on what are we building, we forget that without the people and the activity, we have a ghost town. So the idea of special events being part of downtown is critical. But what happens in every storefront and along every sidewalk and in every public space all the time is also critical. That's why vacancies are so poisonous to a downtown environment or anything that goes against this activity. So think of it as a stage set for life. That's what the architecture is in the buildings. But you really have to think about, too, how are we going to animate this place? What's the play? What's the activity? Because without it, we have nothing. So the guidelines for the public areas, the second section, really came together, I think, from 100% community and stakeholder and town board input. But just some examples, the idea of pedestrian-friendly streets. When we think about this experientially, when we go for a walk in your downtown, we have to have a pedestrian clear zone in the middle of the sidewalk, but to the street side, we have an amenity zone, which is really the town's responsibility, and unless they partner with a shop owner or building owner. But up against the building is the marketing zone, and those two zones really need to be animated. This is part of creating a great downtown experience, and it wants to be interesting. Every building you walk by, it should be a little bit different. We just talked about a park bench, and it immediately came to mind, how nice it would be to be out there right now, sitting outside your building on a beautiful day. And, you know, it's just about animating with street furniture the opportunity for activity. Pedestrian-friendly passages are another thing that are a very high priority. On many of the pages of the pattern book, we included results from the survey, and over 80% said improving the appearance of respondents said improving the appearance of the pedestrian passages is very important. This can be done in small ways, simple ways to make them more neighborly, but that's really what this is about. You have some good examples already, but we've provided guidelines here for how to dress up the passages at minimal expense. And something that town board also has been working on hard in the time of COVID has been creating the opportunity for a town square. That's been embraced in the pattern book, and it's included in the Parks and Open Space section, but really it looks forward to additional community engagement, and we want to be clear about this. This is not a fully cooked idea. It is a great opportunity that the town board has recognized, and it's a future opportunity. But it's a critical part of downtown. If you want to think about it, it's putting a beating heart right in the middle of downtown, a place where we can set the stage for activity that really becomes the Instagram moment, or the place where something different could go on every day. It is something that downtown's lacking, and your residents recognize that. So in the final section, the objective design standards for private development, this is kind of what your zoning ordinance has today, which we all recognize. It's sort of a shoebox. And again, this is part of where the process started. Your zoning creates an envelope within which a developer can build, 5 stories, almost property line to property line with a very high floor area ratio, but not a lot of guidelines beyond that. So we respect that, but we also, through this process, have worked on getting input about how the shoebox should be articulated to become a downtown building. And part of that is setting objective design standards for the private development blocks. And this is one of those, as you can imagine, and I know you all know, sticky issues. How tall should buildings be? What should the lot coverage be? So our recommendation on this is pretty straightforward. And again, we were looking for a balance point, because we have input from members of the Business Advisory Committee, for example, that really, say maybe nothing should happen. The existing zoning allows the most flexibility. Then you have others on other committees and also residents saying nothing should be taller than 3 stories. We struggle with both of those because there's been a strong negative reaction to the large new building that has been built, especially the latest one, Riverview Lofts. However, on the other side, that's what you permit today, and to take away 2 floors of development makes it difficult. So we ask the question, is there a balance point where we can create a 3-story appearance, but still allow largely the same floor area ratio or building value on a site? So our recommendation is to permit 4 stories or 50-foot maximum instead of 60, and above the 3rd floor require a 45-degree setback. But in combination with that, allow 100% lot coverage. We think the 20% that's not covered in the back of downtown commercial buildings doesn't buy you very much. And in return for that, require a green roof on a portion of the roof area. This is an issue for downtown. Almost your entire downtown is paved, impervious surface. What does that do? Enhances runoff and flooding beyond sea level rise. So by detaining some of the water on each of these sites over time, it would be a huge help to mitigate some of the contributors. I don't want to say all of them, but some of the contributors to your flooding issues. And then here you can see the 45-degree setback from the parapet is where it's defined. So This is not on all sides of buildings. It's just facing streets, and if you were facing an historic building. If you're a building in the middle, it would only need to do this on a street face, or if you're facing, say, the Peconic River, but it's not everywhere. And that's why by going, you're currently permitted as a right to cover 80% of a lot. By going to 100 and 4 stories, you get the same amount of value as 80% in 5 stories. The only caveat being this step back on the front. But we think this also adds value to the town because this becomes a patio space which would be animated and create more activity along Main Street and the secondary streets. And again, along the streets, the balance point is we get the 3-story appearance. So 3-story appearance, 5-story, 80% value. That's where we've tried to strike the balance. And I would say to all of you, we've been questioned, is this for both sides of Main Street? It is. There's one recommendation. We've been asked, could we go to 5 stories on the north side of Main Street with a 45-degree setback? Whoops, sorry, like this, but just up for another story. And just to be honest with you, in getting preliminary feedback, giving just an overview presentation to the Business Advisory Committee, Landmarks Preservation Committee, they're not necessarily opposed to that. It's the south side, though, that's the most sensitive area because of the views, air, and light coming into Main Street and blocking that. And that's where the smaller scale buildings are, and that's where you're connecting to the Peconic. On the other side, it's an open point, and we look forward to your feedback on that. So architectural styles, we would say, are the other kind of sticky issue. This is always sticky because it's subjective. And we as architects all look at things through our own rose-colored glasses, which means that we have kind of inherent bias. And today there's not a unified vision about style within our profession or within the United States or even worldwide. So in that vacuum, I think the town of Riverhead has done a really good job in with Landmarks in doing historic preservation guidelines, and there's really, you already had in place a really good document for that. And Landmarks is able, I think, to manage that and understands it just to its core. It's where we get into new buildings that it's a little bit more challenging. And this is actually a page from your website. It's on Landmarks. If you go to the Landmarks Committees tab on your website, underneath it, there's a link which talks about new buildings, and there's a 2-page document. And importantly, what it says about new buildings, because this is your current guidance, it says new buildings should seek to establish themselves as future landmarks in the progression of Riverhead's development, future landmarks. And then there's a series of links below, and these are to architects' websites that members of the Landmarks Preservation Committee have identified as representative of that idea. And we just, from that site, pulled out these 3 examples. And the reason I include this is the other day, when we were giving Landmarks an overview, they do not have a copy of the pattern book, only the town does right now. But as the supervisor said, it's about to be released, and they'll review it, and Landmarks will review it and provide comments. But they said in contemporary architecture, they were concerned that we didn't do, that this idea wasn't fully embedded. So so we had a discussion about that. But these are examples of what they show. But if I'm a developer coming in today, that's really all I have to guide me. So you get into this negotiation. And I think the Preston House and Hotel is an example of something that took this route and went through this process with Landmarks. The challenge is, though, that that type of building isn't the majority of what's getting built downtown. So I included this, we use this in our town planning practice. This is a diagram by Leon Creer, who's a famous international architect. But it talks about the structure of a town. And the structure of a town is monuments with squares, but without, monuments without squares streets, no, it's just the monuments. It's what we call the public area of the town. And when that's combined with the streets and squares without the monuments, the fabric, that's how you get a town. So you have the public elements, and it's called res economa, but really it's the economy, it's the economic driver, it's what developers build. 95% of the town, the fabric, those two things together give you a town. And the challenge with these kind of commissions are monuments, where we have a really kind of highbrow, more public use. We have a building type that lends itself to that, that's programmatically flexible, and we have higher budgets. It's not what you're typically getting right now in development applications, which are fabric and mixed-use buildings. They're residential over ground floor retail, and trying to do that on a budget, create a monument, is tough. And we understand that, so the pattern book encourages and allows for that monumental architecture when appropriate. But what we've tried to do with the other 95%, the economic engine is say, no, if you're not going to build a monument, then let's at least build a respectful, decent building. And that's really what the pattern book is about. It's about filling in the gaps. There are differences of opinion about whether or not that's a good idea, but that's our approach in finding a balance point. Because it's too far to leap to go from this to every fabric building, and that's what developers are bringing in. Their objective is not to build a monument, it's to make money and then do what the town wants in terms of, I think, having a building that fits in and is respectful, hopefully. So that's where the pattern book is focused. We've talked about things like massing, how to be in scale with downtown. We've talked about composition. We've talked about how to do a good storefront. We've talked about contemporary architecture. And contemporary means of its time, so it has very broad definition. New buildings that are built downtown are contemporary. Landmarks and ARB would like to see them be more modern. And actually they asked that we update or change some of these images to reflect that. And we've done that, but we did not want to show you anything that you haven't already seen, so we did not put them in today's presentation. They'll be in the draft that's released tomorrow. But the idea is that you can still do contemporary buildings or modern buildings. But if you want to do a building that's a tribute to the town's history, you can do that too. And at the end of the day, and I'll conclude with this, what we heard from the citizens is, from the residents, we really like the eclectic nature of our town. We really like the diversity. And we don't want to have a unified architectural approach, to be honest about it. However, we also don't want ugly buildings in our downtown, and that's subjective as to what they are. We've tried to define that shoebox, or change it or transform it, put some guardrails on the road to make development decisions fair and predictable. To actually give the developers some guidance, because right now, in a vacuum, they're all over the place, and by the time they spent the money and come in with a development application and spent money on architects, they're not probably in a great mood to go back and do it all over again. So the pattern book, and this is back to its intent, tries to provide guidance for the 95%, allowing 5%, and that's where we are today.
Any comments?
No.
You're fine? Jody?
Nope.
Catherine?
Well, I was waiting to see if anyone else had comments. I just wanted to talk a little bit about what prompted this, Barry. You talked about it a little bit, but what prompted us even doing this pattern book is that when the downtown committee began their work of looking at the current zoning, there were a lot of differing opinions. For example, the community, as you talked about, the community really wanted to see 3-story buildings. Personally, I like the 3-story buildings. But at the same time, we had to balance it out because the business community wanted to be able to, make a profit on their buildings. So it was there was a balance point that had to be reached, and that's what I like about this, in that, they are still getting the same amount of space in the building, and yet with the setbacks and such, what you're telling us, Barry, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the buildings aren't gonna have that boxy look. They're going to have more of a look as if they are, a 3-story building, correct?
Right, they're meant to be articulated. I would call it articulating the box. You know, it's not just taking a shoebox and putting wrapping paper on it. There's small articulation of the massing, there's rules about composition, there's suggestion about storefronts. And it really, yeah, I think it was kind of an adversarial thing. It was the business community a little bit against the kind of broader aesthetic taste of the residents, and these things were in opposition. And again, we've tried to find a balance point. We don't see it as a compromise. You have a wonderful, diverse downtown. However, there might be a tipping point in the future if you get too much of one thing or the other. And, you know, the realities of the current environment even are, residents would like to probably see not nearly as much residential development. But the economic realities are, that's what's driving most main streets. So there too, you know, if we're practical about it, residential needs to be part of it. Residential wants to be in you know, fabric style buildings, but we're very encouraged that you can do a profitable 4-story building in downtown Riverhead, have it fit in and be quite lovely.
Well, one of the buildings that people got so upset about was the Riverview Lofts building. You know, people are upset about the look of it. I mean, personally, I don't like it either. But what we have to realize is that is what our current zoning allows. Our current zoning, the developer built exactly what is allowed by our current zoning. And so that's one reason that we started this whole process to look at the zoning and get more of a downtown that, you know, that the community wants to see. And that point is very illustrated just this past week in all the feedback that we have had from the community as to this whole issue with the Norton House, which has been a real challenge to find a spot for that. But I think if you read all the comments, and there's, I don't know, there's like 400 comments, and plus we've had feedback from people. People are looking to sort of retain the historic look of our downtown area, and we need to take that into account because that's what our community wants to see. The other point that I wanted to talk about was there has been this school of thought, and if other board members want to weigh in on it, that all of the new buildings need to stand out from the other buildings in being modern architecture. And I think from what I'm hearing, there are some concerns with always requiring modern architecture because it is hard to get good modern architecture, correct?
I think, and I want to be respectful, because you have very smart folks that are advocating for that, and their wisdom about architecture is extensive. I think for us, it's not really an issue of modern or what kind of style, but the urbanism really sort of transcends architectural style, this idea that you have monuments that are the most important moments, and then you have fabric. The challenge which we have, and I'm going to say this throughout all of our practice, and I've been doing this 30 years, is trying to make fabric look like monuments. And modern architecture, and these are good examples, you have libraries and museums, playhouses, those kind of things, sure, absolutely. But when you get down to a mixed-use building where the developer is trying to get his apartments to lay out properly and meet the needs of the tenants, you know, they may not be looking to take this kind of an approach. And actually, even on the town's website, when you look at the examples, they're not examples of fabric buildings on Main Street that I found. I've been through, I think, all those links that did that. And so what we're really saying is we respect that approach and we agree with it for the most important buildings, but we're also acknowledging exactly what's happening today in development applications. So you get a site like the subway site, this is not how they're gonna approach it. They're gonna approach it as a fabric building, and they want it to have a character that meets their perception of the market and their understanding of the market. And the guidelines try to give a building like that, a developer like that, some guardrails, so that they can still participate without getting into an awkward negotiation and coming up with something that's a mishmash, kind of mush at the end of the day, which nobody's happy with either.
Well, and another reason that we did the pattern book was, what you talked about was, and I know that planning will agree with this, is to give a guideline to developers. And I actually think in the big picture, it will move the process along, because there won't be that as much back and forth, because they will know right from the beginning, they will have a guidebook to look at, in moving forward with their project. So in the end, I hope that people will, be pleased with this final product. I know that there are many in the community that will be disappointed that it's, that it's 4-story, and there will be some that are disappointed it's not 5-story. But there is a balance here in that we are having 4 stories, but with all the setbacks and such, it will have a much different look. And for me personally, I would like to keep it the same on both sides, just because our community has been so strong on all of that. And I thank, the board for helping us, get this pattern book company going. I thank my fellow board members for that, and I thank you for all of your work, and the planning department, of course, and the fantastic participation that we have had within our town, which I am very proud of.
Absolutely. And Jeff Murphy, Don Thomas, I mean, your key people at the town have been a huge help to us too.
Yes.
And again, we're doing the best we can to reflect the community input, and we do feel confident that we have a good balance point, but we look forward to receiving comments back. That's what the draft is for, and there will be tweaks, I'm sure, based on what we hear and the feedback we get from the board.
Yes.
So
one thing that I just wanted to, in looking at the 45-degree angle on the top floor, if they decide to do a full build-out rather than a privately owned public space, that, I like that, and it's something that the Landmarks Preservation Commission has been requesting for years when a new structure is built right next to a historic structure like the Dorosky House, where the ridge line, the 45-degree angle would start directly parallel to the ridge line of the historic structure. But I think that you have it just on the 4th story. So I think that's something that we'd probably want to see changed.
that's a good, and we'd be happy to talk about that. I'll tell you about our, we debated that too. I'm glad you brought that up. That's a great one. Our feeling was that by their nature, those freestanding historic buildings stand out. And East End Arts would be an example, I guess. Although those buildings aren't original to that site. That's kind of a stage set that was, of relocated buildings. Our worry was that, our worry was that creates kind of special zoning for certain properties. And having one standard from a predictability standpoint, and also, we're not sure aesthetically that 3 stories is a problem next to an historic building either, to be honest about it, but there's a smart growth principle that says make development decisions fair and predictable. And that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to make them fair and predictable, so we have one standard that's universal, and you don't end up with special requirements for special sites. But we'd be, love to hear feedback on that. We debated that both ways, and we landed on the 3rd-story parapet as the spring point versus your neighbor's building.
I guess it's just the airspace and light of the historic structure is what I'm trying to preserve.
Exactly. And honestly, there aren't too many cases where that would become an issue. And we looked at the churches, we looked at East End Arts. It's a tough one. The other thing, when you say historic structure, an inline building can be not, yeah, I guess it would have to be a freestanding historic structure. But,
Right. But thank you.
it's a great
I'm-
catch, though. That's a great catch that you made, and it's definitely been something we've debated.
I think you've done a great job, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
And Jody is correct. I know, Kelly Schauger, who's on Landmarks and ARB, has always brought up that point, Jody.
Yep.
And I just wanted to mention, I did want to thank Jefferson Murphy, who has been with us all along this process. He hasn't missed a single meeting. And the downtown committee actually has been really instrumental in everything. We, just before we even brought this great firm on, within the downtown committee, we have architects and planners. And the original idea of using a pattern book came, I believe, Janice Scher, who is the head of planning in Southampton, is the one that actually told us about this. So this was a real collaboration within lots of people in the town, and I hope that people are pleased with what they see.
Thank you.
We're excited about it, and again, it's activity. If we have a ghost town, we haven't accomplished anything. That's the most important thing. We all know that. And, especially right now when we kind of all long for that. We have to focus on the most important thing being the life and vibrancy of downtown. It's not just the stage set. And these things go hand in hand, so we don't want to in any way diminish the importance of that. And I think it's real tribute to the town that you have consensus on so many different issues in the pattern book. And then on the other ones, we've tried to strike a balance. And as we dial those in, hopefully we'll get close to perfect by the time the public hearing and adoption happens.
And Barry, I want to thank you for including the USACE, the United States Army Corps of Engineer. That was something that me and Jody had worked on in February, and that was critical to making this a more a collaborative process and more realistic. That's in the works. The USACE met yesterday with Dawn and Devin, and that's moving forward. And when I met with you in November of last year, and I said, these are the 10 things that I think should be included, and you were saying yes, and we went through them, and and thank you for putting them in, because they were critical. It took the pattern book and it took it to a different level where it would be more useful for us, so I thank you for that. And concerning the 4-story buildings, I am happy to hear that you didn't go to 3. And if you did go to 3, we were going to have some civil, legal problems in that respect. People, developers and landowners here in downtown will buy a building under a certain code, right? The DC1 code, which allows you 5 stories. And if you turn around as a board and you say now it's 3 stories and you're cutting their monetary funding, monetary what they make, that's going to be a problem, because you'll be violating their airspace, and you're also violating their ability to build under a code where they purchased the property to make, to have, and have funding. So I think that was very critical, and the 4, I'm sure that it's a lot more acceptable, and that's what you came. Those were your findings, but this was a lot of money that was spent in this, and you did a good job, but this should not rest in some archive somewhere. We just have to move forward. And from what I get, the bottom line, the most critical component of this was the 4 stories. I think that's what we got out of it, correct?
Yep.
I mean, that was very critical for developers and for the community to understand.
Yeah, I would just say, and Barry, of course, you did a great job, and this was really a great process, as Catherine has brought up, but if we don't do our due diligence with this planning and the zoning, and give the 100% with the 4 stories, with the setback, we're not gonna drive investment, because people won't wanna come downtown and spend money if we're not giving them an opportunity to invest and make money. But I think you did a great job with the 4 stories and with the 45-degree setback. I think in 100% FAR, I think that's a reasonable, balanced approach.
It is, and thank you so much, and you'll be hearing from us, probably today, before we release the book. Anyone else?
Fantastic. We love hearing from all of you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barry.
Can
Thank you very much. You have a good day.
Can
Hi,
I,
Barry.
can I amend the agenda to give the board an update on the Norton House?
Sure.
Okay, so it'll be brief, but I did meet with Hink Electric yesterday, who said that they could probably move the Cablevision lines, because I haven't heard back from Cablevision. Verizon is going out to do another appraisal based on the move, which is going to have to go down Main Street, 3 blocks to Roanoke Avenue, make the turn on Roanoke heading north down to 3rd Street. So on the east side of Roanoke, there are 3 street trees there that would have to be removed and replaced. There are also, no parking signs that could be unbolted and lifted out, and there's also a light post there that would have to be moved and then put back. And then once you get down to 3rd Street, in order to make the swing off of Roanoke onto 3rd Street, there are 2 street trees that are adjacent to our parking lot on the corner of Roanoke and 3rd that would have to come out and get replaced also. So Verizon is going out, as I said, they gave us an estimate of $13,000 for just moving it across the street. So I imagine their proposal is going to be much greater than that, and I'm asking all of them to work with us and with the town based on all the comments on Facebook to try and preserve this historic structure and be a good partner in the community. Hink Electric has said that they will donate their time in order to do that, and I'm asking the same of the other agencies that would be involved in moving this house. But I just wanted to let you know that we're talking about trees coming down and getting replaced, and B&G would probably have to remove the signs and the street lights and then replace it. So it's a big effort, but hopefully we're going to be able to get this done by October 15th. I'm just waiting for the other estimates to come back in, but it's still in the works.
Okay, have you notified the developer what's going on?
Yes.
Because I did get an email this morning, and it was one line. I hope this move of the Norton House does not affect our plans to move
Yeah, I know,
forward.
you know what, I'm surprised that you're still getting those emails, because I didn't see that, but I did speak with Bobby Walsh yesterday, I spoke with him the day before, I spoke with Chris Kent yesterday afternoon, and, I said, October 15th is the date. They said you probably have more time than that, because it's probably gonna take us a little bit longer to get a demolition permit, but we're shooting for October 15th as the drop dead date to move this house.
And what is the cost to the town?
There will be no cost to the
Okay,
town.
that's perfect.
Yeah, but I have to get the estimates back and find out whether or not the utility companies will move these lines to get the house through free of charge, because it's 30 feet wide and it's 30 feet tall once it gets onto the truck. So you have to either go under or you have to go on top of the lines. They lay the lines down and then you drive over them, or they lift them up. So they're currently doing that analysis now to determine what they would have to do in order to move this house. But I guess the critical part for the town and the expense to the town would be to B&G to, remove the trees and to move the poles and the light posts. But I'm working on also getting a tree donation to have those same trees, same caliber, to be replaced.
Jody, can you go over again the exact location where it's going to end up?
Right behind the 2nd Street Firehouse, in line with the gray shed, behind the 2nd Street Firehouse on 3rd Street.
And what is the use that they're thinking of using it for?
Well, he thinks he has a tenant, but he has to spend $250,000 to $300,000 in order to get the building up to par, because all the sheetrock would have to come down, and the electric and the plumbing and all of that would have to be replaced. So he's thinking that one of the Montauk Distillery may want additional space for their rum. Montauk Distillery is looking for additional space, so he's hoping that they will go into that space.
That's
No.
where we just went to the ribbon
And
cutting,
expand,
right?
yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was fun.
The town is donating some of the property, right?
Yes, and the
Okay,
town would be
how much?
donating some of the parking, the district property, but we don't see it as a problem. I think we're actually gaining some stalls too.
Well, keep in mind, part of the program we spoke about this morning is that 3rd Street parking lot, having that paved and striped.
Right, and directly across the street is the, Northwell Health bought the Suffolk County National Bank building, so
Mhm.
there's that large parking lot over there that doesn't really see a lot of utilization on, Roanoke
Evenings and
Avenue.
weekends, yeah.
Right. Okay. All right.
Thank you for your hard work, Councilwoman.
It's determined. I
Let's
tell you.
hope we are passing out a lot of certificates to the utility companies because they're doing this free of charge.
Okay, thank you, everyone. There are no items on executive session today. Can I have a first and a second to close the work session, please?
So moved.
Second?
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So moved. Everyone be safe and see you on Tuesday.